It's difficult not to see parallels in the events in Israel today and the stories of the biblical episodes. I'm not. Don't worry. I'm not going to go on to talk about Armageddon, but the current crisis in Israel resonates deeply with biblical narratives. Notably, the story of Joshua's battle with the Amalekites, where he led Israel to victory over a fierce army. The tale depicted by Nicolas Poussin in The Victory of Joshua over the Amalekites embodies the themes of resilience and divine intervention, a parallel some draw to Israel's ongoing struggle against regional threats. The statement about by Pierre Poilievre on Israel's defense against Iran evokes a similar historical motif. He frames Israel as the bulwark against a modern Amalekite force, an unstable theocratic regime threatening annihilation. This echoes the biblical imagery of a small nation defending itself against overwhelming odds, empowered by a moral clarity that stands in stark contrast to a world grappling with moral ambiguity. The problem is it's not as simple as that, because it's very difficult at this moment to see a perfect evil and a perfect good, because Netanyahu has compromised his own country's standing, and his treatment of Gaza colors every attempt to draw parallels and to favorably picture the sort of David versus Goliath image. What we see instead is something much more visceral, something much more barbaric, which actually brings to mind a lot of the conquests, a lot of the fights of ancient Rome. I mean, for example, when we think of the Game of Thrones, I suppose many people have looked at the Game of Thrones and looked at, for example, the death of Viserys Targaryen, who had molten gold poured over his head. Well, long before that, the king Mithridates collared Manlius Aquilius, who had flu, and made him choke to death on molten gold. And it's none of the people in that particular story come off terribly well. It's not this epic fight between this person on the one hand and that person on the other. There's a sense instead that everybody is stained. And the biblical narrative wants to underscore the enduring theme of Israel as a physical and spiritual entity contending with existential threats. And this duality is reflected in contemporary politics, where Israel's survival is seen as emblematic of a broader struggle for freedom and justice. But Gaza and support for Israel is not merely based on sort of a shared history of 2,000 odd years, but a reaffirmation of civilization's foundational values. But it's very difficult to follow that understanding because of Netanyahu's aggressive siege. The international community's response, therefore, contradicts a lot of the biblical values, particularly institutions like the United Nations, which faces criticism for its perceived moral failures. This juxtaposition of biblical narratives of modern diplomacy underscores a disconcerting moral inversion. As seen with the UN's actions, many view these bodies as inadvertently endorsing the very forces they were established to oppose. But part of that is precisely because of the ambiguous relationship between justice and truth, and right and wrong, and the and the and the decision to move beyond defense to attack and to revenge. This is the backdrop against which Israel continues to act, defending its right to exist in a world that often appears indifferent or at times hostile. And for many, Israel's resilience embodies the biblical promise of survival and redemption in the face of adversity, a notion that transcends the political and resonates deeply with the spiritual, or would do if it wasn't for Netanyahu and his band of hooligans. I find it really difficult to genuinely support Israel's right to self-defense in the face of the threats from Iran, which are real, because I find it really difficult to turn my back on the behavior in Gaza, which is heinous and seems to be, and it looks as if it's going to be duplicated in Lebanon. I hear quite a number of people who I know are now leaving Tehran for other countries because they are scared, with good reason. This is a story which is quickly ramping up to something very worrying indeed. And where does it go? Where does this story lead? I think I think I'll stop here, and I will do another piece about the festival that begins this evening, which is Yom Kippur.